Good morning and welcome to OSW Daily. Thank you for joining us today. This is your first time coming across the channel. I hope you find this interesting and beneficial to you. If you do, please consider subscribing, liking the video, hitting that notification bell so you're alerted to all upcoming videos. So what do we do here at OSW Daily? Well, we think about all the current topics that's been discussed around work, workplace, employee engagement, workplace productivity, and then we bring in a thought leader, an industry expert to actually discuss some of those topics. Today, that's no exception. So what are the specific things that we're going to be talking about today? Today, we're going to be talking about creating an employee-centered return to work. We've heard a lot about return to work, but actually, what does an employee-centered return to work mean? Protect employees and customers, improve efficiencies and workflows, streamline communication, and mitigate risk and respond to changes. So it's a lot to get covered. So who are we going to be discussing this with today? Today, I'm very happy to have welcoming back to the channel, CEO Jonathon Hensley. Jonathon is an author, speaker. He's also the co-founder and CEO at Emerge Interactive. So let's bring Jonathon in right as we talk now. Jonathon, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Welcome back. It's been a little while since we've actually been on together, so it's good to welcome you back.
Well, it's great to be here. A lot's changed in just a few months. It seems to be the new standard.
It certainly is. So I mean, it is a while, and you said a lot of changes. I mean, you're in Portland, Oregon. You've went through a series of changes there. What's it been like to live there? You know, your family, and obviously your business.
Well, quite candidly, Portland's an incredible city and with incredible people. And I think what has been in the media is unfortunately kind of painted a darker and bleak picture of the city, and it's far from it. We've been through a lot with all the different things going on, politically, to what's been going on around, addressing issues of equality, and especially most recently with the wildfires that we had that swept the whole Northwest. So I think what I have really seen mostly is an incredible sense of community and support of your neighbors, your local businesses, and really how do we look out for each other and come together regardless of differences, regardless of point of view, and make sure that we're all doing the best that we can during these times.
Yeah, no, that's great, and obviously we absolutely see it on the news. It's interesting how things get reflected. But obviously, when we last spoke, you were telling us how your company had went from office based to remote. How has that sort of taken place over this time? How have your employees responded to that?
Overall, our employees have been absolutely thrilled with the change. And for us, as we discussed before, it's been fairly minor. Being in a role where we support and develop digital technologies and products, we're used to this type of work environment. I think what we're starting to see, like a lot of other businesses, though, is a little bit of fatigue, where we're, the Zoom fatigue, if you will, or being on conference calls and not being able to have that connection and that interaction with people is starting to show a little bit. And we see it with our clients as well. They're really looking for those opportunities of when can we get back in a room together? When can we re-engage, missing that deeper connection that's hard to do remotely.
And how do you answer that question?
Well, for us, we've really focused on little things right now. It's how do we make sure that we come to our calls the best prepared? How do we make sure that we spend time and make time in our meetings to check in and not just dive into the work, but really make sure and check in with each other and with clients and with partners. How are you doing? How's your family? How is it teaching your kids now that you're doing remote schooling? How is it getting out? Are you able to dive into new hobbies? And it's really, I think, showing that you genuinely care in a really meaningful, authentic way. There's not a lot of room for the small talk anymore. It's more of, I want a genuine connection with people. And so they have to be really genuine and questions that you're not glossing over, that you're spending time and really listening and are working actively to build that connection. And that just takes more emphasis and a little bit more attention today than it did before.
Yeah, that is it's often glossed over those intricacies right, been really intentional. So in my day job, I'm trying to run all these focus sessions, and this is coming up an awful lot, right? Everyone wants to go back to the office to meet their teammates, and working from home, it's great, we love it. But it doesn't provide that structure, and everyone's looking for that personal collaboration. How do we come together? And it is so important to be intentional about when you turn up to a meeting, right? You're not being there to be entertained. You're being intentional. You're delivering something. There's a purpose for you being on there. So it is great that you're having those conversations actively within the organization.
Yeah, it's, our team and our managers are fantastic at what they do. And so a lot of my time from a leadership level right now is just trying to facilitate connection. It's not as much as it needs to be in, we have a team of experts at what they do, of developing experiences for customers and for employees, looking at how to innovate products. But my job right now is not to really lead any of those disciplines. It's really focused on not losing sight of those subtle things that we have to do to be building connection and making sure that our teams feel supported.
That's great. That's great. Now, obviously, you're working on a remote basis, but you did send me something through a white paper that you've creating an employee-centered return to work. It's interesting. I really want to dig into this. So, what do you think of the opportunities for employers right now in this COVID era?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think one, you have to recognize that in this current environment, that we are probably witnessing the biggest failure or fall in social trust that we have ever seen in this country, and maybe worldwide. And I can't speak to outside of the U.S. personally, but this issue of social distrust, of misinformation, information changing all the time and not having any continuity in information has been incredibly impactful and erosive to the social construct that we have between employers and employees. And this is something that it doesn't stop at work. It's something that people are dealing with at the level of society. And so as employers, I think we really need to understand and recognize that that is the environment that we have to rebuild our strategies in. That is something that we have to take special care and attention to. And if we can do that, then we have the context we need to make much more effective decisions and how to develop a return to work strategy that is employee centric. And if it's good for the employees, it is guaranteed good for the customer. And so how we do that will really protect the continuity of businesses going forward and their ability to adapt to new changes as they come going forward.
Now, you mentioned the trust or the connection between employee and customer, right? As a CEO, how do you do that narrative? What comes first, the employee and the customer? It's a tough thing to really get right. And an employee thinks they should be first, the customer thinks they should be first. But as a CEO, how do you balance that?
Well, I think that you, have to really make sure that everybody on a team understands that what they do, why they do it, how they do it, that impact it has on the business and on the customer. And we can't be operating in silos of information anymore. We have to make sure that we're really intentional about communicating and every employee understands their contribution. I don't care what level of the organization you're in. I don't care, if you're cleaning an office or if you're, in, senior leadership, like everybody needs to understand their contribution right now, and that's empowering, that's liberating, that allows people to bring their best selves to the workplace, and that is going to reflect in how they're able to engage with customers, have the resources and support they need to take on challenges, and also address recovery issues where maybe there's an unhappy customer, and how do you address that? Well, you're going to be much more effective at addressing those things if you have empowered employees who understand their responsibilities and are being set up for success.
And obviously, with this, your organization operating in a remote fashion, when you're in the office, people get to hear those conversations with customers. Maybe they don't get to hear colleagues talk about other customers, so there isn't that opportunity to really learn from each other. How are you addressing or thinking about that?
Well, for us at Emerge, what we've done is we have regular stand-ups as a company and within project teams. And so we do that where we're sharing information, even if it's related to clients or projects we're not all involved with, we're sharing that information so that there's the awareness of what is the rest of your teammates going through? What are they dealing with? The deadlines, the responsibilities, the expectations, and those things go a long way. They really help people understand how they can not only support their colleagues, but also understanding what resources or changes they might need to make in their needs or their expectations short term to help everybody be successful. And so we're finding that that's really helpful in helping people feel connected in a remote work environment. It's helping people understand how their work can be organized to be more efficient, more effective, and making sure that all clients' expectations are delivered on.
Yeah, and just as you were saying that through what you were saying there, a concept that came to my mind that I heard yesterday, I hadn't heard of it before. It was called Think and Drink. And basically what it is teams that operate, maybe they operate in different departments, but they do the same functions. They come together in this remote environment and they share each other's experience over a drink. But they think about it in essence, here's what we have learned, here's the things that we need to do better. And then there are other teams that do and supporting other customers, other products, then all come together. And I hadn't heard it before, and I thought it was a great concept.
Yeah, I love that idea. Maybe we'll start doing Think and Drinks.
I think whatever brings people together, right, it gets people talking about it and stuff. But
Absolutely.
So in the white paper, right, there's 4 opportunities you've said for employers in the COVID era. And you've identified these 4 things: protect employee and customers. And we've touched on that a little bit. So what about improve efficiencies and workflows? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think that the way that we worked before COVID has been, obviously is completely different. And I think that as we think about a return to work strategy, and especially as we think about how much we're leaning on technology, we need to think about how we improve and change our workflows and the way that we, really adapt. So thinking about is our old workflow actually the right workflow going into a remote environment? Do we have the right tools? Do we have older tools that maybe need to be modernized? Have we done it maybe in a physical way now that needs to be digitized? How do we streamline the ability to work and collaborate through using the right technologies? Are we making sure that information is being able to be transmitted upstream and downstream through the organization? So many organizations are dealing with right now needing to map what's the current workflow. Maybe they've never actually formally documented that workflow, or visualized it to see what does that look like. And then identifying, wow, now here are all these opportunities to improve efficiency, to go more digital, to look at ways to make it a better experience for employees. And while doing that, have a magnificent leap forward in productivity and effectiveness. A lot of times, for example, one thing we run into a lot is a lot of people are doing really data intensive things in like Excel documents. Well, what if you could have a tool that could take that out, and now you have a collaborative environment that is able to bring data real time into the workflow process and push it out as completed? Those are huge advantages at scale. So, making sure that we're thinking about those kinds of things as part of our return to work are really important. And then also understanding that it's a change for a lot of organizations that have really in the past embraced a more of a centralized or on-premise model, that they have to now start to think about distributive tools, distributive collaboration, and what that looks like. And for some, it's the first time that maybe certain processes or workflows have ever been challenged to be done that way. And so it's really important to consider that as you think about your organization going forward and supporting employees and that return to work strategy.
No, you're talking about supporting employees, but the other side of the equation is employees, right? What guidance can you give to employees to embrace those tools or raise those ideas or become more prepared and open at this time?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to it. One is that from a leadership perspective, you need to make your employees and your teams a part of creating that new process and solution. That is such an essential piece to getting buy-in. And no matter how, deep our expertise and experience is, our frontline teams have incredible insight information that will make or break the transformation and those efficiencies and workflows. So that, I think, it has to start there. On the other side of it, if you engage, I think, employees in that process and they have buy-in in it, it's so much easier to get adoption. And you can then develop a much better communications plan and adoption plan, and you can, clearly communicate, why did we make decisions this way? Well, we had to do it this way because we're also collaborating with these 4 teams over here, and this is critical information to their process. And by visualizing that, sometimes you can show that the interdependencies of work for the first time, and teams that have never maybe worked together are seeing that for the first time, or maybe that was never communicated, and that can be game changing. It usually just comes down to context. Once they understand the value of it, they're able to dive in, and they're willing to do the work.
And when you talk about the value, is it the value to the organization or value to themselves? Both.
Well, I think both. I mean, the value to them should be tied to the value of the organization, right? If we all have a job for a specific reason and a set of responsibilities that come with that job. So, doing that job well should be table stakes. It should be something that everybody is embracing. But we need to connect that to the bigger picture. We need to say, this process actually makes a difference. And it makes a difference all the way up to the very biggest goals of our organization, and it is essential to delivering on the promises we've made to our customers. If that connection is not made by leadership, then we as employees we will fill it in to the best of our abilities, but that doesn't mean it's right. So leaders need to do the hard work of building that connection and building that alignment between every function of the business.
Right. And as we go through the list, number 3 was streamlining communications. Communications is key right now, right? So what do we mean by this? Or what do you mean by this?
Well, I think, in this type of environment when we're thinking of communication, it takes on multiple forms. One is, how do we communicate about what's happening in the company when we're remote and not able on site? Like you said, there's not that water cooler talk or that ability just to kind of engage in communication. So how are we going to keep teams up to date in a thoughtful way? How do we, if we do have employees on site, how are we responding to location specific information? What if there's an incident? What if there is somebody who it comes back, they were positive for COVID? How is that communication and that response plan, going to be organized? How are we thinking about putting, smart applications, on your phone in people's hands so they can get notifications, instant messages, not just emails or, other things? How are they able to assess and collecting data that's going to be really important? These are all communication channels, they're all tools. And I think companies need to expand on how they use those tools in order to support the new reality that we're in going forward.
Yeah, and organizations are great at passing out information, right, in many forms to employees, and employees are really good at ignoring it, right? So what strategies have you found to be really helpful that sort of allows organizations to communicate directly with employees?
I think when we think of employee experience, we need to take some of the key lessons we've learned in customer experience. It's about personalization. Generic memos and blasts, don't have a lot of value to a lot of people, and not everybody needs that information. If you don't provide the context for something or making sure why it's important, and it just becomes noise, they're going to continue to ignore communication. So I think there needs to be a focus on substance and personalization in communications. I think that has to be just the essence of how we move forward. And this goes back to the macro issue we started with. There is a huge erosion of trust that has happened. And as employees, we need to have confidence that we are getting relevant, important information in a timely way that we can count on. If it's changing every day and then we don't know what direction we are having to go or to reset, it's just so draining. We're taking such an emotional and physical tax on our employees that is very difficult to recover from. So it's better to be more thoughtful, and so we can be proactive and very clear in our communications and not generic, or framing broad communications that don't have a direct substance to the team. So I think one of the situations that is comes up, I think, a lot, when we started putting this paper together and thinking about it, we didn't just start looking from our lens of digital products or, employer or customer experience. We went out and we started doing research. We started talking to business leaders and employees in small businesses, in large organizations, hospitals, frontline workers. I mean, everything from paramedics to nurses to somebody working at McDonald's. We really wanted to understand the scope of how this was impacting them, and that issue of make it personal, make it clear. No, don't send me general information, and not just information where I have to process what do I do with it, but tell me how it applies. Right, take it a step further in that communication, so I understand the application. What do you want me to do with this? Because I'm fatigued. I'm overwhelmed with the situation that's happening, not just at work but in the world. And if you can help me bridge that gap, I'm able and more effectively to take action. I think one really great example is something that we heard again and again from nurses. Just the policy on personal protection equipment and was changing week by week. And for some hospitals, they're still dealing with this. And so every time you got a new, for example, vendor for face masks, they would have to go through another training, get fitted again. And you think about then now they've gone through this maybe 5 or 6 times, and they're fatigued of going through training on how to properly wear a mask. It's really important, but they're fatigued. And why can't they standardize that? Or why can't they get into efficiency? Now, every time they go through that training, they're losing time with patients. They're losing opportunities to confront what's happening with COVID, or help the hospitals or these clinics get back up and running to providing other critical services to the community. So, the nurses are incredibly aware of these issues, and the administration is struggling to keep up with that change in some cases. And so how do you think about a return, the work strategy for example, nurses and frontline healthcare, where you can create some things that they can count on, some standards that they can really, move forward in. And I think that should be a major priority for healthcare leaders and for leaders in any organization. How can you provide continuity in a world where there's very little continuity right now? I think that's very important for people to understand and become experts in what they do in a new world.
Yeah, there's so many things in there, and it's interesting. I didn't realize that simple things like face masks at a hospital for frontline workers, that it would be different things. You'd almost think there would be a set way to create that, so that it was one time, once you're training, you're one and done. I did want to ask a question though, because I don't know why, whether it's just as your experience or whether it's just an observation that I've seen, but it seems that when an employer provides communication or training, somehow or another employees devalue it, where they can go and hear the same information from somebody else, and they put a lot more value on it. Is that something you've seen, or is that just I don't know, something that's just not really real?
Well, I think it happens, and I think it's depending on how you provide training. We've had to create educational experiences that are for just small teams, and we've had to do it where we're supporting digital experiences or supporting education for up to 60 or 100,000 people simultaneously. I think what we have to think about is education. You have different types of learners, first of all, and you have to embrace an approach that helps do that, where you're hitting the different senses of somebody and how they retain information. And two, the classroom environment traditionally is just not that exciting for a lot of people. So and they're also they have their other responsibilities. It's not like their responsibilities for the job got put on hold a lot of time during these trainings. So how do you find ways to incentivize and engage that? And I think that's an opportunity for exciting ways to invigorate employees, and it's, maybe you do it in smaller groups where there's more intimacy and ability to have communication and sharing. Maybe you remove certain barriers where you realized in order to create a safe space for employees to talk about something, you've got to, like I'll use myself example, being the CEO of a company, maybe I'm not the right person to be in the room or be facilitating that, that I have to step away because I create a barrier to maybe some of the conversations that need to happen. I need to check my ego and step out of that space and understand what needs to happen. We see a lot of times just the way that content is. It's long form, kind of almost a traditional academia approach to employee training. That tends to not be nearly as effective of kind of breaking things up into small digestible chunks. I mean, we think about how we are in our spare time or personal time consuming media, whether it be social media or other forms of media. We're absorbing small incremental chunks of information. We're trained now to scan headlines and not do, deep reading of content. So we need to design our educational practices and for employees around some of that same critical thinking. Give them digestible small chunks. Instead of sitting in a room for an hour, how can I get a really, really powerful lesson and tool distilled into 10 minutes? And then, today and then tomorrow, do the next piece, and so it's going to be different for each organization, but I think, asking yourselves those types of questions, understanding what format is really a necessity in your business based on your company culture, the different, skills and types of things you're trying to discuss and teach. Can you deliver an immersive experience virtually right now? Or if you are in person, how have you set that up to be successful? And those types of things are really going to help you have much more, I think, effective and rewarding experiences for employees going through that educational process.
Yeah, no, there's a lot in there. I do love the fact you mentioned about those shorter forms, and I suspect over time as the Gen Z comes in, and those will be getting down to 30-second or 15-second videos. But absolutely, it is short, sharp, to the point messages that people want to take today. The other thing that I did note that you mentioned was not being in the room and how that may impact what the conversation was going on. I'm doing a lot of focus groups at the moment, focus sessions at the moment, and what I've noticed a huge difference between in-person and virtual, where when leadership is in the room in person, they tend to sit back, observe, and watch. Where when it's virtual, they tend to lead the conversation. And it's just fascinating to see the difference, the dichotomy of this, just the social culture and social cues that actually come through. It's just fascinating.
That's a really great observation. I'm going to have to watch myself, make sure I'm not doing that. I think the other thing that I saw recently is I went through a course with a coach with an executive group, and really this coach, she had an amazing perspective on stepping back and recognizing the difference between those that are extroverted on your team versus introverted. And I think this, sometimes, like, I know that I'm in meetings all day on Zoom, but sometimes I'm craving deeper or fun, conversations and connection because I've been sitting in my home office, for the last 4 days in a row. And that can easily happen. And I think she made a really good point that it's really important, especially in a virtual space, which is harder, to create the space for an introvert to come out, to engage them in a thoughtful way, or understand that some people need to process information before they can contribute, versus those who are just more adept at, like, I think on my feet and I react. And both have equal contributions, but they have a different way of processing information. And so I think, also creating space in your programs for that type of thinking, along with what you're saying, can be really powerful.
Yeah, and that's why obviously you have people send out agendas ahead of time, so basically they can turn up and they're ready to talk. Because I for one, I know I am much better if I know what we're going to talk about the day before, right? Because in essence, it allows my brain to really process and think through things. So I think it's a really, really cool tip that you've given there. So are you going to say something else?
Oh, no, I do the same
Okay.
thing. I need the information in advance. It's
Yeah,
something that
yeah,
it's a huge advantage to me, to really, because I want to make sure that we're getting to the outcome of whatever the meeting
right,
was.
right.
When I began my career 25 years ago, it was like, that was the number one thing I got first drilled in my head. No meeting should be made without a clear outcome. and so that prep time is so important to me.
Yeah, no, that is great. So go back to the four opportunities. Number four, mitigating risk and respond to changes. Um, I mean, some of it is relatively self-explanatory, but I think that respond to changes is really important because there is no definitive end in this. It's going to be a constant iteration. So we have to be have that adaptability, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. I think adapting to change, the resilience of a business has always been really important. When we talk about, the viability or sustainability of a business, it's been tied a lot to how resilient or adaptive can a business be to change. And now we're really being tested at a level that no one's ever been tested at before. And so, technology has an incredible way to help us be adaptive to that change. And so, do we have the right tools in place? Are those tools scalable? We've moved away from kind of this old model and technology of monolithic solutions to more like hyper focused. How do we help people do very specific tasks or get to very specific information quickly? And so, this is kind of the whole premise of platforms. How do we make sure all of these things are connected and building on top of each other? So we have an amplification effect where it's more powerful, but we're still bringing focus to the individual areas so it doesn't become cluttered and clunky and then doesn't really work at all. And so that ability to have those kinds of things in place and thinking and our processes are really important, I think, to mitigating risk and adapting to change. I think the other thing that's really super powerful is, and it's very low tech, is have you ever visualized your customer journey? Do you understand their needs and their motivations before they engage with you, as they're learning about your products and services, as they're engaging in your with your products and services, and how are you supporting retention and building loyalty and trust with those customers? When you can map and visualize that out and let every function of the company see that, it is game changing. And when you can see, okay, this change is happening, you can look at that map and go, what impact does it have on the customer and where in the customer journey? And then you can start to hyper focus and target. And then you can start to look, well, what functions of our business is responsible for delivering and collaborating on that promise at that stage of the journey? Okay, we know who needs to collaborate and be rolling up their sleeves and getting into the thick of it together to solve this problem. It's not this team's problem, it's the organization's problem that's encompassing of these functions. And that organizational approach to that work, instead of it living in a singular team or structured a silo, is really, really powerful to mitigating risk and being adaptive. The same thing can be said for, have you mapped your current state of your workflows? If you can visualize that and everybody can see that, your ability to innovate is exponentially increased.
No, that's fascinating. That's a really important thing to do, right? What is the customer journey? What is the map, and then where can you plug yourself in? I'm sure it also brings up other opportunities to provide additional services to, because you're able to sort of map those out or have that conversation with the customer as well.
Absolutely. It also is an incredible tool when you think about bringing in new employees, or maybe you have an employee that's changing roles in the organization. For all of a sudden, for them not to be able to see where that function or that new role fits within providing and delivering on that customer experience, or fulfilling that process and that key area inside the company is so empowering. It helps, like, oh, I get it. If this piece here doesn't work, and customers can't do any of the rest of it. Wow, I didn't realize how critical that thing that I've been asked to do really, really is. And I think it's also a great tool for leaders to show, we're asking you to fill this role. Look how critical it is, because we do trust you, because your skills are critical. And it's a great way to build rapport and confidence, and also be able to facilitate bigger conversations that need to be happening on an ongoing basis now.
Yeah, man, there's a lot we got covered there, and there's the whole lot of other stuff we wanted to talk about. I'm just conscious of the time, Jonathon. So, any final thoughts or comments before we wrap up today?
Well, I have to say, Steve, thank you for facilitating these conversations. I think they're so critical, and there's there aren't a lot of great sources of truth right now. I think this social trust issue is something that, is just such a difficult thing to navigate for all businesses and people at all levels right now. And so being able to curate this kind of insight is incredibly valuable and powerful. I know I've enjoyed a tremendous amount of the content that you've been producing on the channel. So thank you for doing that. And I would encourage any buddy watching this and listening to really look at how do you visualize these things maybe for the first time. There's so much incredible opportunity to make deeper connections and be able to make small adjustments that can help you pivot and be more resilient going forward.
No, that's great, Jonathan. Thank you. I appreciate your kind words, and I appreciate you spending time watching on the channel. How do people reach out with you, Jonathan? What's the best way to find you?
So the best way to get in contact is to visit emergeinteractive.com. If anybody's looking for to talk about more employee experience, customer experience, and digital products, please reach out to us. We offer free consultation and evaluations of existing products and services, and looking for those opportunities to help you innovate and improve. And also, I would recommend connecting with me on LinkedIn. I post regular insights from across the industry there on a weekly basis, and there's a lot of resources available to people.
That's great, Jonathan. Look, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all your wisdom you've shared today, and I look forward to chatting with you very, very soon.